All right, we are recording, and there is something new in the Weather Factory Meltdown game. Let me just switch to Stun Ray here, and as you can see, these enemies got stunned. And each time they have entirely died, which is not actually the way it's supposed to happen. Let's see if this works. Unfortunately, getting stunned did not actually interrupt its didn't actually interrupt its animation. I am going to have to look into that. Whoa. But getting stunned isn't the only new debuff. You can also get frozen. And there it is. Spear Sapphire isn't about to sing Let It Go, though. So, there's debuffs. Enemies can apply them to you, you can apply them to enemies. I've added them under globals here. So you click on debuffs, and as per usual, the way I've set up the UI, it's hiding the complexity. But anyways, you can add a new type of debuff, you can remove one. Obviously, you have to grab one of the standard icons for it. Finally, I've got a use for the debuffs icon category. But once you click on edit, it brings up this UI here. There's the animation, which is your standard custom animation panel here. And you can preview the animation. This is the one for wet. Obviously, it's a couple of semi-transparent drops over the whole thing. And let's see, under controls, you can actually set the opacity for it. 1 to 128 means 50% opacity, 255 means it's totally opaque, 0 means it's totally clear, which would then mean that you can't actually see it. Obviously, these are the controls for setting the icon. These are some controls about where you draw it, like stunned would be drawn above the animation target instead of on top of them. You can do it over the graphic or over the hitbox, stuff like that. You can set the overall element for the whole thing. I'm planning to have debuffs be resistible thanks to the elemental resistances at some point. There's also the duration here. Right over here is the meat of it. On the right hand side, it's where debuff effects get added. Like when you're wet, you're vulnerable to electric attacks. The damage gets doubled. You also cannot use electrical or fire attacks while you're wet, and you can't fly. You might notice that there's two different icons here. There's the icon that shows what the effect is, like no wing means you can't fly, a no over some elements, and a fireball means special attack disabled. A cracked shield, a green plus, and a few different elemental icons show elemental vulnerability, this kind of thing. But there's also a purple icon with a human being and a little robot. That shows that this debuff effect affects both players and NPCs. This one affects just players, these affect players and NPCs. And, you know, the way this level editor works in general is when I have effects like this, what I have to do is just cram every effect that I can think of and that I think I can develop in a reasonable length of time and just let the user select from them. There's oodles of them here. Special attack of specific element disabled, special attack of specific animation disabled, and you can tell that I have some parentheticals here to show whether it's player only or not. There's cannot move, gravity disabled, damage over time, regular projectile attacks disabled, which is players only, which is kind of a misnomer. I believe that applies to regular out-of-the-box enemies as well. Let's see, there's controls reversed. Let's see, cannot jump, cannot turn. These wouldn't really make that much sense for NPCs. Elemental damage vulnerability. Cannot stop moving, turns around at debuff start. Obviously, you put these together and you've got fear debuff. cooldown on regular projectile attacks, special attack cooldown additive, special attack cooldown multiplicative. You can say the cooldown is 2 seconds longer than it would normally be, or you can say the cooldown is 5 times what it would normally be. And first it applies the additive stuff, and then it applies the multiplicative stuff. Unable to interact. If that's on a player, then the player can't talk to NPCs. If it's on an NPC, then you can't talk to the NPC. Unable to use doors, regular projectile attacks weakened, elemental attack damage weakened, and then there's some NPC only ones, like forced into a behavior if the behavior exists, forced to periodically broadcast a message. I mean, there's a lot of potential with this one for scripting. Elemental damage rerouted to global health, movement slowed, no damaging hitbox. Basically, if you hit an enemy with this, then you can stand on top of that enemy if the enemy has a block hitbox that'll actually block the player, which this one will actually cause the block hitbox not to affect the player. A player can walk right through the NPC. That seems like the kind of thing that would be really useful for Metrovania games, but yeah, this whole editor system is just begging to be made into Metrovanias. But anyways, once you have these debuffs created, you can have your player characters have these debuffs for their attacks. And let's see. Let's go with Shadow Bolt here. There is now a new button here, debuffs, right next to attack requirements. You open this one up, and you get this dialogue here, which gives you chances to apply different debuffs. There's a 3 out of 10 chance that any given Shadow Bolt will apply Confusion, and there's also a 3 out of 10 chance that any given Shadow Bolt will apply the Afraid debuff to enemies. Let's see, Silver Flame is similar. I have a Burn debuff, which is basically a damage over time. 4 out of 10 fireballs that Twilight shoots will apply burn to enemies. Obviously that's how it works for player characters. Let's see how it works for custom NPCs. So we'll go over to the Enemies, Bosses, and NPCs tab here. And I believe that Chill Chalcedony here can apply Frozen. So let's go into that behavior there. Run, hamsters, run. That's got a lot of stuff to load up. So we go into combat, bring up the custom attack UI for this. And once again, for NPCs as well as for players, these custom attacks have a debuffs button on them. And, it's the exact same UI. You can add a debuff application chance or remove one if you want to. And there's a 5 out of 10 chance that getting hit by one of Chill Chalcedony's ice shots will freeze your character. So that's about it for debuffs. It took me quite a while to apply all of that and to test everything. Obviously I'm not quite done because getting stunned should have interrupted Spear Sapphire's animation and caused it not to stab, but it didn't. So I'm going to be fixing that bug before I release anything.